In the coming month, August 2025, we're reaching a critical moment of the year. Planets are locking themselves into a remarkable astrological configuration, one that brings together almost all the outer planets. This astrology is symbolic of confrontation and revelation. In particular, there's a strong chance we'll see fresh conflict between Israel and Iran, events that implicate nuclear technology in some way, and perhaps even evidence of advanced technology in the sky. Whatever happens is likely to have implications for the whole planet and to plunge us further into a new, technologically supercharged, spiritually transformed, multipolar world. Hold on to your hats, friends. In this video, we're going to dig into the astrology of August 2025, including what it means for you as an individual and for the wider world. I'm your host, Dan Waits. This is World Astrology Report, and welcome to another journey into the past to understand the present and the future. As we move into the second half of 2025, world events are starting to get really weird. And around these parts, that's just how we like it. On July the 7th, Uranus moved into Gemini, marking the last of the major outer planet sign changes of this past couple of years. As we saw in last month's forecast, Uranus in Gemini promises radical developments in flight and information technology, as well as major upgrades to our understanding of how reality works and our place in the cosmos. And in this recent video, I talked about how Uranus in Gemini, as well as September's eclipse in Virgo, seem to promise an overhaul of the US dollar and the global monetary system. And we're already watching that manifesting before our eyes because on July the 18th, President Trump signed the Genius Act into law, which is a piece of legislation that sets up a regulatory framework for stablecoins, which are essentially cryptocurrencies pegged to the value of the US dollar. Of course, there's probably no planet more closely associated with the archetype of the genius than Uranus. Is someone doing astrology here, or is this just another example of the synchronistic unfoldment of reality and the cosmos giving little winks to those of us following the symbolism in the stars? The plan behind the Genius Act seems to be to try to keep the US dollar afloat as global reserve currency by allowing major banks to launch dollar-pegged stablecoins. The idea seems to be simply to enshrine it as the most widely used and convenient global currency and to maintain the dominance of the cartel of banks behind the US Federal Reserve System. Several of America's biggest banks like Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, and Citigroup have already said they're considering or planning on launching stablecoins. Trump has explicitly contrasted this approach to the centralized central bank digital currency approach taken by other governments around the world. To be sure, it does look less controlling, less centralized, and less communist. But both CBDCs and stablecoin-based digital currencies essentially amount to the same thing: a currency regime that allows every transaction you make to be tracked and potentially even controlled and restricted. Make no mistake, the digital panopticon looms ever larger. Uranus is a surprising, sometimes even shocking influence, and July supplied its share of shocks, most notably the incredible spectacle of the Trump administration pulling a complete about-turn over the Jeffrey Epstein case. Suddenly, to widespread dismay among MAGA supporters, an administration that had campaigned on promises of transparency on issues just like this one declared that Epstein really did kill himself and there is no client list. Of course, there's some misdirection here. What's really important about Epstein isn't whether or not he killed himself or even whether some secret list existed. It's what it tells us about how power really works in America. Epstein and his partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, had been convicted for sex trafficking. Well, trafficking to whom? There hasn't been a single prosecution of any of the clients, many of whose names are already well known. This is despite the fact that it's also well known that Epstein had recording equipment all over his properties. It's very, very obvious that Epstein was running some kind of blackmail operation, probably on behalf of certain intelligence agencies. And besides Trump's own history with Epstein, that's surely why this hasn't come out so far. Now, this Trumpian betrayal looked like the very opposite of what Uranus in Gemini promised to deliver. It's a planet of sudden, surprising revelations. This looked more like the door shutting on the truth than opening. So what was the revelation here? Well, what's being made clear to all is evidence that cover-ups really do exist, and that no matter who's in power, the same thing happens. The very rich are protected, and justice is nowhere to be found. Those who enter the political system saying they're going to bring transparency quickly become mouthpieces for the very conspiracies they promise to expose. What's more, we're starting to see the exposure of the very mechanisms of manipulation that are used to control the political system from behind the scenes. What's especially interesting and perhaps promising right now is how these realizations are cutting across the political spectrum. When it comes to issues like Epstein, as well as the disgraceful conduct of the Israeli military and de facto ethnic cleansing in Gaza, it seems to me that MAGA is coming to the same conclusions as the left. So even though Uranus may not have delivered the truth in the way we expected, we may just have seen cracks opening in the edifice of obfuscation. But there was more, much more, in July. Right now, we're seeing air sign activation by two heavy-hitting outer planets. Uranus in Gemini has formed a trine with Pluto in Aquarius. Both of these planets are associated with revelation. Uranus, the sky god, reveals from above in flashes of inspiration like lightning. Pluto, the lord of the underworld, shows us what lies beneath. And there's one place where we're seeing both of these planets expressing themselves together: Egypt. Back in March, the CAFRE project, a multidisciplinary team of researchers led by Italians Filippo Bondi and Corrado Malanga, released scans and visualizations of incredible structures supposedly extending hundreds of meters below the CAFRE pyramid in Giza. The scans are created using synthetic aperture radar technology. Radar pulses are emitted by satellites, and the data is analyzed to infer what lies below the ground. Again, think Uranus and Pluto, the sky god and the god of the underworld. What I found interesting about the timing of this news was how it was making waves at the spring equinox of this year, which is precisely when Bibhu Dev Misra believes the Kali Yuga ended. What event could more perfectly symbolize the end of the Dark Age than the rediscovery of amazing structures secreted away below the ground by our advanced ancestors before the Kali Yuga began? For more on that, see these two videos on this channel with Bibhu himself. Now, on July the 9th, the CAFRE project released new scans of the Sphinx and the area beneath it. They reportedly show a void within the body of the Sphinx and large chambers hundreds of meters below it. Could this be the Hall of Records spoken of by renowned psychic Edgar Casey? These scans are controversial, of course, and mainstream commentators are claiming that they're some kind of pseudoscientific hoax. But whether or not the technique turns out to be valid, this work is shining a light on ancient Egypt and on the efforts by mainstream Egyptology to hide and obfuscate the level of advancement of our ancestors. And it's causing a lot more people to ask questions about humanity's true origins. What we're seeing here, I think, is a growing awakening to the reality of cyclical time and the idea that civilizational advancement rises and falls over time. I think there's a lot more to come, and if you want more on this, I suggest you watch this video, in which I explained why I think we're going to see massive revelations about our ancient history in general, and Egypt in particular, in the coming months and years. Oh, and there was something else in the sky in July, literally. On July the 1st, astronomers at the Atlas telescope in Chile detected the third ever interstellar object seen in our solar system. As the third such object ever identified, it's been given the name 3I Atlas. The first interstellar object, Oumuamua, was seen in late 2017 and gave rise to speculation by Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb that it may have actually been a technological probe of some kind. And now, with the sighting of 3I Atlas, Loeb is once again making the same kind of speculations. He's pointed out that this object has some very unlikely characteristics that suggest some intent behind the path that it's taken. That may or may not be true, but there are some interesting astrological patterns at work with 3I Atlas. And in the full version of this video, available for World Astrology Report members here on YouTube or at worldastrologyreport.com, we dig into them and we ask the question, is 3I Atlas a comet, an alien probe, or something else entirely? What's clear is that there are some tantalizing suggestions of a new world, a much weirder world, emerging right now. But if you restrict your news consumption to mainstream sources, you're not going to know that. We're seeing a growing bifurcation between the way reality is portrayed in mainstream media and a weirder and wilder alternative picture that you need to go to alternative media to see the contours of. To be sure, the alternative media is sloppier and not as well resourced, and you have to wade through tons of bullshit to figure out what's most likely to be the truth. But what can you do when the mainstream media increasingly just looks like Pravda? Any radical change to our understanding of reality was always going to look just like this, with the so-called nutters claiming something really amazing is happening, and the so-called adults in the room saying there's absolutely nothing to see here. The defenders of the status quo are trying to plug holes in a sinking ship and calling anyone who deviates from their narrative a quack or a kook or a grifter. They have a very clear idea of the right answers to all the big questions of the age. That applies to everything from UFOs to ancient history to climate change to the safety and effectiveness of certain experimental medical technologies. But that approach, which, by the way, is unscientific, is not going to move us forward in any meaningful way. With Uranus and Gemini, sign of the twins, this bifurcation in worldviews is only going to grow. Congratulations, you live in interesting times. Oh, and one last thing. At the time of putting out this video, there thankfully was no tsunami in Japan this month, as predicted by Ryo Tatsuki, even though there was a volcanic eruption and an earthquake swarm in the Tokara Islands. As I said last month, there seems to be a cosmic law that very well-known prophecies don't come true, and thankfully, that seems to have held in this case. That's enough reviewing for now. Let's move into the forecasting part of the video. If you're enjoying this video so far, please do give it a like and subscribe to this channel and enable notifications to make sure to catch future episodes. Oh, and I have some good news. If you've been considering signing up as a paid member of World Astrology Report, now is the time to do it because I'm launching a summer sale. If you sign up as a member on my website, worldastrologyreport.com, before August the 6th, you'll get a 30% discount on the usual fees. Just use the code SAVE30. This discount will apply to your first payment, after which fees will revert to the usual price. But remember, you can binge as much of my content as you like while you're signed up, and you can cancel at any time. Membership also gives you access to ad-free extended versions of all my videos, as well as all my long-form live streams, where we go much deeper into astrology, history, and esotericism. You also get access to my private forum. Oh, and here's the real kicker. You can also get the same 30% discount if you sign up for a year's membership using the same discount code SAVE30. That will save you even more money. So fill your boots, and remember, this discount will only be available until August the 6th. Thanks for listening, and now back to the video. On August the 6th, Mars enters the sign of its exile, Libra. Libra, a Venus-ruled air sign concerned with balance, aesthetics, and capital S society, isn't really Mars's kind of place. Mars in Libra is like a barbarian warrior at an art gallery opening. The warrior doesn't take too kindly to being asked to care about things like social graces and etiquette and diplomatic niceties. He may try to make nice, but ultimately he's frustrated, and his rough manners are likely to be exposed sooner or later. Mars will be in Libra until its move into Scorpio on September the 22nd. But in terms of action in the world, Mars's transit through Libra will be front-loaded, because as soon as Mars enters that sign, it will form an opposition with Saturn and Neptune in Aries. When it does this, we'll see the formation of an incredible astrological configuration of the outer planets. This is what's called a Kite configuration, and it's one I've talked about several times before on this channel. I went into depth on what this configuration could mean in this video, in which I teamed up with remote viewer Josh Maitland to try to understand what might be coming around this time and its consequences. We won't repeat all that material right now, but we will recap some of the major points. At the core of this configuration is an opposition between Mars and Saturn. This is a tense aspect of confrontation, but importantly, it signifies a key moment in the synodic cycle of these two planets. Processes and storylines involving challenge, contention, and destruction often fall into the rhythm of this two-year cycle, and we see major developments when the planets make major aspects. And as always, we can look to events that came at the conjunction of the cycle to understand what it promises. The conjunction came in April of 2024. Around this time, Israel and Iran were exchanging attacks. There was also a sense of tension and expectancy as the world waited to see how each side would respond to each fresh assault. And so confrontation between Israel and Iran seems high on the list of possibilities for this period of early August. I think nuclear technology is also likely to be implicated somehow. It's a theme that runs through the Israel-Iran conflict. And right now, at the end of July, we're already seeing a rash of stories that are clearly setting the stage for this conflict. Iran believes Israel is responsible for a wave of explosions and fires, and its president has been quoted as saying that Iran won't be abandoning its nuclear program and is ready for war with Israel. Also, in April 2024, at the Mars-Saturn conjunction, Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest such facility in Europe, came under attack. The same thing happened again at the Mars-Saturn square in August 2024. I think there's a high chance that the theme of nuclear technology is going to be implicated in coming events in August. Generally speaking, in 2025 and 2026, we're reaching an important cyclical moment in the history of the nuclear age, which arguably began in 1942 with the first controlled fission reaction. We're now reaching the Uranus return, Neptune opposition, and Pluto opposition of this moment. And I think we're going to see a turning point in our relationship with nukes and nuclear power. That could be due to some kind of attack or accident, or perhaps this is the period when the technology will be superseded by something more advanced. But there's so much more going on in this configuration than just Mars opposing Saturn. Because Saturn is conjunct Neptune, which is forming a minor grand trine with the other outermost planets, Uranus and Pluto. So there's something about this moment that carries the revelatory shock of Uranus, the otherworldliness of Neptune, and the transformative power of Pluto. I get the sense that whatever happens here will have big implications for the world and for ongoing global transformation towards a multipolar order. There may even be an otherworldly theme to the developments we see. They could well involve advanced technology, particularly airborne tech, and who knows, maybe even UFOs. The theme of UFOs and nukes came up in Josh Maitland's blind remote viewing sessions. He also saw dramatic events involving water, think Neptune, and there was the sense that this would be some kind of moment of revelation. Josh has uploaded an extended video of his remote viewing sessions on this configuration to his YouTube channel, which is linked below. Oh, and this configuration also looks like to have big implications for the United States, both at home and in terms of its role in the world. In the US Sibley chart, the midheaven and IC, two of the powerful angles of the chart, are in the first degrees of Libra and Aries, respectively. That's where the Mars-Saturn opposition at the core of the Kite configuration is taking place. At this point, all we can do is watch and wait and hope and pray for the best. Astrology and remote viewing are not exact sciences, so nothing is written in stone. I'll be watching for manifestations of this configuration through the first couple of weeks of August. But August the 9th, the day it goes exact, is particularly interesting because that very same day we also get a full moon. On August the 9th, we'll see a full moon at 16 degrees and 59 minutes of Aquarius. Aquarius represents a particular whole sign house in your natal chart, a part of your life in which life takes on a more Aquarian flavor. It could be that the people you meet in this part of life tend to have strong Aquarian placements or traits, or perhaps Aquarian themes like outsiderdom, innovation, and systems thinking predominate here. Full moons are moments when we see the outcome of things sown in the past. And so expect a revelation or culmination or turning point of some kind in the Aquarius whole sign house of your chart. But what's interesting about this full moon is that it's dialed into the energies of the Kite configuration that we already discussed that goes exact on the exact same day. One reason for that is that this is a full moon in Aquarius, which is traditionally ruled by Saturn, which is a core part of the Kite configuration. It's conjunct Neptune and opposed by Mars. The conjunction of Saturn and Neptune has been in play for many months now, but it's become much more apparent in the world since Saturn joined Neptune in Aries on May the 25th. You may have noticed that certain parts of life, the parts of life governed by Saturn in your chart, have become less reliable than usual. There may be a sense that things are dissolving or lacking the structure or solidity that they usually have. But it may also be unclear what exactly is going wrong, or how things could be fixed, if they can at all. This is Neptune's influence. I think we have to accept a certain degree of uncertainty and mystery in parts of our lives that we used to have a better handle on at the moment. Trust that this period of dissolution is needed to build stronger foundations later. But back to the full moon. With the ruler Saturn conjunct Neptune and opposing Mars, there might be a sense of confrontation or blockage at this full moon. There might be a sense that you need to accept that something can't progress any further in the same direction and that change is needed. But actually, this full moon is in a semi-square. That's a 45-degree aspect with Saturn and Neptune. We can see this on the 90-degree dial. The Sun and Moon are opposing Mars, Saturn, and Neptune, and are at the midpoint of Pluto and Uranus. So this could be a really tense moment of confrontation, but there's also great transformative potential here. The minor grand trine is a generational signifier, but it will be hitting each of us as individuals too, and in different ways. I'm starting to understand that there is great alchemical potential to this period if you're willing to dig deep and ask yourself, what am I being shown here? How am I being asked to change? And how can I grow from it? We can also use Dietrich Pessin's lunar gestation cycle technique to pinpoint exactly when the seeds of this full moon were planted. Lunations come in families associated with similar degrees that are separated in time by 9 months. The themes that will come up at this full moon were seeded around the time of a new moon at 20 Aquarius on February the 9th of 2024. On November the 9th of 2024, there was a first quarter moon at 17 Aquarius that would have taken this story forward. If you're a diarist, look to those days and a couple of days either side to get an idea of what this full moon could bring. Now, on August the 11th, Mercury stations direct at 4 Leo. If you're having a tough time of this retrograde, I recommend you watch this video with Gary Caton that I just released on Mercury retrogrades. What's interesting about August astrology is that besides the more challenging configuration that we've been talking about, there's also something very sweet happening. On July the 31st, Venus made its ingress into Cancer, joining Jupiter, which is in its exaltation in that sign. So for most of August until the 26th, when Venus leaves Cancer for Leo, both benefic planets will be in Cancer together. The two planets will make their exact conjunction on August the 12th at 14 degrees of Cancer and 3 minutes. Mark that date. This conjunction is great news for whatever whole sign house Cancer represents in your chart. It promises both Jupiter's expansive, optimistic presence combined with Venus's more sensual and personal sweetness in the same part of life. Cancer is associated with bounded spaces of identity, with protected places in which we can truly be ourselves, in which emotions flow freely and openly. This is the sign of the moon. In an archetypal sense, Cancer speaks to the home, but depending on how your chart is set up, it could be a very different part of your life that takes on a Cancerian flavor. Perhaps you're an Aries rising and Cancer is the 4th house of home and family. This Jupiter-Venus conjunction will bring blessings to your home. Perhaps it's time for a warm family gathering or to decorate home in a way that inspires you. Or perhaps you're a Capricorn rising, in which case this conjunction is taking place in your 7th whole sign house of relationships. This could be a beautiful moment with your partner. If you're single and looking, you might even meet someone. So there's warmth, growth, pleasure, and fortune arriving in Cancer this month. That part of your life will offer shelter from the storm. Now let's change tack, because Virgo season is coming. On August the 22nd, the Sun enters Virgo. The image representing Virgo is a young woman holding an ear of wheat or corn, and this time of year is harvest season in many parts of the world. Now, the Sun is in Virgo in the month leading up to the autumn equinox, which is the moment around September the 21st, when we move from the half of the year in which light predominates to the half when darkness has the upper hand. And so this moment is symbolic of the descent into the underworld. What happens in the underworld? Well, we are judged. That's why the sign that comes after Virgo is Libra, the scales. For its part, Virgo is aware that judgment is coming, and so it's concerned with sorting the wheat from the chaff, with improvement, with scrutinizing lives and systems to see how things can be made fit for judgment. And so Virgo humbles itself in service and apprenticeship. It takes care to understand the natural world and has an eye for its processes. Virgo, like Gemini, Sagittarius, and Pisces, is a mutable or double-bodied sign. This is because these signs come at the end of the seasons, when the next season starts to make itself felt, but the last is not yet done. The two-ness of the twins and the fishes and the centaur are obvious, But what's the duality contained by Virgo? All the earth signs have a pleasure-loving side to them. Their primary triplicity ruler is Venus, after all. And this is true of Virgo too. A virgin is a chaste woman, but another sense of Virgo is the sovereign woman who does what she likes with her body. So Virgo carries the sense of both chastity and libidinousness. Virgo is both saintliness and sin. On August the 23rd, we'll see a new moon in Virgo and thus a new beginning in this part of your life, where those Virgoan archetypes make themselves known. This new moon will be in a close square to Uranus, the planet of freedom, sudden change, and innovation. So there's going to be a strong impulse to change things up here, to start doing things differently. There's a new beginning coming here that could be fueled by a strong urge to shake off old constraints, or which is kick-started by events that you don't see coming. Now, before we go, there's one last astrological event that I want to highlight for August, because we'll be reaching an important moment in one of the core planetary cycles that we track on this channel. On August the 29th, Uranus and Neptune will form an exact sextile. And so there's a conversation happening between the revolutionary Promethean impulse of Uranus and Neptune's concern with the ideal, mystical, and imaginal. Richard Tarnas writes that Uranus-Neptune alignments correlate to widespread spiritual awakenings, the birth of new religious movements, cultural renaissances, the emergence of new philosophical perspectives, rebirths of idealism, sudden shifts in a culture's cosmological and metaphysical vision, rapid collective changes in psychological understanding and interior sensibility, certain forms of scientific paradigm shifts, new utopian social visions and movements, and epochal shifts in a culture's artistic imagination. All that sounds rather wonderful, of course, but the archetypal picture right now is more complicated. With Saturn conjunct Neptune, there's a certain pessimism and sense of disillusionment in the air that's offsetting the sense of possibility and awakening that the Uranus-Neptune sextile is providing. But we can be more concrete about what this aspect is likely to signify by looking in more depth at the Uranus-Neptune synodic cycle, because this sextile constitutes the first major aspect between these planets since their current cycle began with 3 conjunctions in 1993. It's the first of 5 exact sextiles that we'll see between now and June 2027. Now, if we want to know what's coming into being over the course of the current Uranus-Neptune cycle, we need to look to events that were happening at the time of their last conjunctions. Back in 1993, Uranus and Neptune formed 3 conjunctions in the 19th and 20th degrees of Capricorn, marking the beginning of a new synodic cycle that will take us through to the year 2165. It was around this time that the World Wide Web was born. Think revolutionary connectedness. That's Uranus-Neptune. It seems to me that one of the manifestations of the sextile is likely to be a new phase of development of the web. It's quite clearly turning into something different at the moment. Tech companies are trying really hard to get us to interface with the web through AI. If you search on Google, the first results you get are from Gemini AI. And often, if your question is answered, you won't even bother to visit the websites that the search has surfaced. So AI seems to be eating the web and making the old school search engine obsolete. Of course, this poses an issue. If AI kills the websites that feed it, it will essentially be like a parasite that kills its host. It'll have nothing left to feed on. This is where the totalizing digital control grid steps in. The plan is presumably for the AI to feed on the minutiae of our very lives. Everything we say and do, recorded, transmitted, and processed. But I digress. Tarnas describes Uranus-Neptune alignments as signifying major scientific and cosmological paradigm shifts. And in 1993, at the start of the cycle, Stephen Greer launched the UFO Disclosure Project, which saw dozens of insider witnesses testifying to the reality of the UFO phenomenon and the US government's interest in it. Love him or hate him, Greer provided a significant landmark here. And it tells us that this theme is baked into this Uranus-Neptune cycle and is likely to find fresh and stronger expression during the Uranus-Neptune sextile period. We'll explore this theme in more depth in the bonus section of this video, available for members of World Astrology Report. In 1993, there was also a major development in the use of psychedelics for treatment of mental health problems. The Hefter Institute, which researches the use of psychedelic drugs for medical treatment, was launched that year. So keep your eyes open for major developments in that area. And 1993 was a big year for astrology, with the launch of Project Hindsight, which aimed to translate ancient astrological texts from languages like Greek and Latin and to revive older forms of astrology, including Hellenistic and medieval astrology. So this Uranus-Neptune sextile period will likely see major advances in the recovery of ancient astrological knowledge. And the obvious driver of those advances would be AI. There are plenty of untranslated astrological texts and ancient cuneiform tablets and all sorts that are ripe for automatic translation and synthesis. Another major development in 1993 was the launch of the HARP project, which has been linked by crazy conspiracy theorists to weather manipulation. Of course, we couldn't possibly endorse such theories on this channel, but keep an eye out for news about weather manipulation in the coming weeks. Conjunctions of Uranus and Neptune also tend to coincide with major peace treaties. They signify moments of greater connectedness between states, Neptune, but which also preserve some sense of their independence, Uranus. For example, there was a conjunction of these planets at the Peace of Westphalia of 1648, which gave rise to the institution of the nation-state itself and the principle of state sovereignty. The next Uranus-Neptune conjunction was coming into orb just as the Treaty of Paris ended the Napoleonic Wars in 1815. Fast forward to 93, and the last conjunctions that initiated the current cycle. Just before that, the Soviet Union collapsed, of course. 1993 itself saw the signing of START II, the second Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, in which the US and Russia agreed to reduce the number of ICBMs that they held. It's kind of hard to see how it could happen right now, but I do wonder if the Uranus-Neptune sextiles will signify some kind of rapprochement between the US and Russia, and maybe new agreements on cooperation or arms reduction. 1993 also saw the agreement of the Maastricht Treaty, which gave birth to the EU. So keep an eye out for the launch of projects and technology that signify the advancement of European integration. What's more, NAFTA, a free trade agreement for North America, came in 93. So I'll be looking for new agreements around greater North American integration in the coming weeks and months and years. I know a certain US president who's been pushing for precisely that. That's almost it for this video. If you haven't got tired listening to me yet, I've been quite busy this past month and I've made a few other podcast appearances that you might want to check out. I joined Adam Summer on his Constellating Cosmos podcast and Gordon White on Rune Soup here on YouTube. Links to both are in the description below. Now, in the bonus section of the members version of this video, we look in more depth at the discovery of the third ever interstellar object detected in our solar system from deep space, 3I Atlas. Apparently, it's just an interstellar comet, but Professor Avi Loeb of Harvard University is once again suggesting that it could be a technological probe, as he did in 2017 when Oumuamua arrived. What's going on? I have another idea for how we should see 3I Atlas, not a comet, not a probe, but a secret third thing. To watch that video, sign up as a member here on YouTube or on worldastrologyreport.com. And remember, you can get 30% off by signing up on the website and using the discount code SAVE30. If you want to know more about the astrology of the Kite configuration that we talked about earlier, I suggest you watch this video, in which I was joined by remote viewer Josh Maitland, who got some incredible data about what might be coming in early August. Thanks, and see you next time.